do you become a better writer?
We can help with that. Hello and welcome to Writing Momentum. I'm Christopher Maselli, here with my wife, Gena. Oh, do you think I forgot your name?
Well, no. Last time we recorded, he left it as this dramatic pause, and
Yes.
so this time I thought I
She's
would
like,
just jump in.
I know what my name is.
I know.
Well, hey, this week we're going to start a series on how to have writing momentum. I don't know if you know this, but that's the name of our business.
That's the name of. And what do we mean by that? Writing momentum. We're talking to people who are wanting to grow in their writing. They're wanting to grow in their publishing, their writing, their marketing, just everything in their author branding. Those are all really core to who we are and what our company is about. And so we wanted to do a series on how to give your writing momentum.
Yeah, so this isn't about writing faster necessarily. It's about writing better, right? How to give your writing real momentum in as you're putting your pen to paper or your fingers to keyboard, as it were.
Really, it's about the quality, getting
Yes.
the quality out there.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that, Chris. What do we mean? Today we're talking about continual learning. This is our tip number 1 is continual learning.
Continual learning.
What do we mean by that?
Well, so some more to say. Keep learning about writing. So many of us have had the experience of having been through high school and college and had English classes and, that sort of thing. Or we may have kind of a proclivity towards writing and we do a pretty good job when we write. But it's very easy not to keep your finger on the pulse of how to write today, right? And how to write different kinds of items, and to just think, we already know, we're good enough at that. And I think there's something that we have learned out of our decades of writing. It's that we're still learning. There's still a lot to learn. Everything you write, there may be something you can learn about that. And so going through continued education with your writing will make you a better writer. It will give you writing momentum.
And here's the thing is that you can hear someone talk about writing and you can hear it at year 1. You're just brand new. You're going to take one thing away. At year 2, you're going to take something else away. By year 3, you could hear the same message and take something completely different away. By year 10, you may finally feel like I could teach this, but it's only because you have such a broader understanding of what it is that the person is trying to say.
Yeah.
Writing is so much more than just grammar. I hear a lot of people and they think, well, I can write a sentence, I can write a paragraph. But when we're talking about writing, we're talking about story structure. We're talking about, if you're writing blogs, it's talking about the flow of a blog. And by the way, story structure works in nonfiction and in fiction. You use it in both places. If you're talking about writing a magazine article, different types of magazine articles will have different structures to them. So there's a lot in the structure of it that is a necessary part of learning.
This was something I learned early on, is that if you can find the structure of a piece, the standard accepted formula that people use, you will be doing better than probably 75% of the writers out there before you ever actually start writing the piece, right? Because there are certain standards that everything needs to have. And if you will meet those standards before you start putting yourself into it, right? And making it your own, you are going to rise to the top, because most people don't even know what the standards are. They don't know what the rules are. And so when they start to break the rules, it just looks like a mess.
Yeah, and I think one of the most frustrating things for me when I'm working with someone who's a new writer is when they're not open to learning those standards.
Oh, yeah.
When I see somebody who has a great story idea, or they have a great idea for a nonfiction book, or they have something that they're wanting to do, a children's book. I've heard this from children's book authors before, where they have not learned the structure, the standard structure of what is acceptable and not only what publishers are looking for, but what readers intrinsically are looking for. We have been trained as readers to expect certain things when we're reading a particular genre. And if it's not there, then it isn't as satisfying.
Right.
So
Yeah, I like to talk about movies in this regard, right? Because it's easier for us to put wrap our minds around this. If you've ever been to a movie that doesn't include all three acts, act one, act two, act three, it's very noticeable. And you can't help but wonder, why in the world did this movie not have a first act to it? Like, did the writers not know you kind of need to have that to make the story work? Now, there are those movies that break that rule, but if they break it masterfully, it's okay. But if it's because the writers just didn't understand basic story structure, it makes the whole thing fall apart.
Yeah, and here's the thing, as you're talking about that, because there are different techniques. So a lot of times people will, and we're using this as an example,
Yeah.
but there are times when movies will lop off that act one, but really what they're doing is sometimes they're restructuring the movie and the film in order to create drama. But if you don't understand the fact that there are three acts, that they are breaking the rules for a purpose, that the reason they're doing different things, and that's why, you know, you see movies, they'll start with the explosion and the crisis
Right,
moment,
right.
and then you'll go back like 36 hours earlier, or they'll all of a sudden you flash back to something earlier in time.
Yeah.
There are different techniques that as writers we can learn to create drama or to do something better, but it still starts with that three act.
So how might you do this in terms of writing something like a blog or a magazine article? Like, what would you say is the, without getting too deep into it, because that's not what today's podcast is about, but what is kind of a general structure that someone should follow if they're wanting to write something like that?
Okay, so if someone is wanting to write, say, a magazine article, and first of all, there are different types of articles you have to know. If you're saying, well, I want to write magazines, well, that's great. Do you want to write features? Do you want to write how-tos? What is it that you're wanting to do? Are you going to do an interview with a question response? What kind of article are you going to write? So first you have to know what that article is. But so for instance, you're wanting to write, say, a how-to. You want to do a how-to article. I like to start, you have to first, I like to outline it, know where I'm going with my story, what are the points that I'm going to do. But I like to start with a story. I like to draw because that's the lead of the article, and you have just seconds to get people, to get readers interested in what you have to say. So I like to start with some kind of story that hopefully is dramatic and interesting enough to get somebody interested before then I start giving my 7 points to whatever.
Yeah.
Say you're saying like a how-to, 7 tips to this. The series that we're working on right now, how to give your writing momentum. It is a how-to series that we're working on in a podcast, but you can write a similar style to that in an article. But I would start with that strong story lead. I would then give someone a reason to care, and that comes with emotion. And then I would promise some kind of resolution of what they can expect to get out of it before I start going into my points. And then I have to also learn how to write a conclusion, which is one of the hardest things. Your lead and your conclusion are often some of the hardest things to write. And I would also look for evidence. Am I going to use interviews? Am I going to use statistics or studies? How am I going to bring this together to make it more interesting?
Now, if you're listening to this right now and you're thinking this all sounds very complicated, like I was not thinking that writing an article would be so complicated, here's what I want you to know. This is not that bad if you can just learn what you're wanting to write yourself. So when I first started to write middle grade novels, the first thing I did is I went down to our local bookstore. I found some of their best-selling middle grade children's novels, brought them home, started reading through them, and as I read through them, I outlined them. I found out what is it that others are doing to make their novels work in terms of story structure. And after reading about 3 of them and getting some outlines, I was kind of ready to start to say, I think I can start playing around with this on my own, because you see the commonalities right away. So find whatever it is you need to write. If you need to write an article that's a how-to article, find some other how-to articles. Outline the way the person wrote those articles, right? Or the people who wrote those articles. Find the commonalities and then use that as your structure. I mean, doing that will go a long way. And that is what we're talking about with continued learning. Sometimes you can continue learning on your own like this, and sometimes you need a little help, which is where you can go for other things. Like you can find courses online. For instance, there's a lot of courses out there. In fact, we have a lot of our own courses online. If you like the way that we teach in that, go to writingmomentum.com. You'll find out we have this monthly membership. And in that membership, for one very low price, you get access to every course that we've recorded. We used to sell these individually for quite a bit more, and we just said, you know what, let's make it all available to everyone, because, hey, then we can all have writing momentum.
Right. You can also, you're already listening to a podcast, you're listening to this one, but there are other writing podcasts out there. Find one that really resonates with you and continue to learn. And I do want to point out that today we're talking about, we've talked a lot about structure, but there's also a lot that you can learn. If you're wanting to write fiction, you can learn about point of view. You can learn about story structure itself. So the structure of your novel, but also the structure of how to tell a story. You might want to build humor into your work. And so you need to learn how to write humor better.
How to have good dialogue.
How to have good dialogue.
Yeah, there's a lot of
how
things
to build richer characters.
But you don't have to know all of that before you start. Don't get us wrong. We are big proponents of, look, just start writing, finish writing that first draft, and then as you do, and then you'll listen to a course, right, on character development, or listen to a course on dialogue, and you'll have then your story that you finished already in mind, and it's a lot easier to go back and edit the kind of things that you learn in there.
Yeah, and that's what we're talking about, continual education.
Yes.
This isn't something that, I'm going to get a bunch of books, I'm going to read them all, and then I'm going to be ready, and I'm never going to pick up another book. No, writing is one of those things, the more you learn, or the more you do it, the more you realize you have to learn. And there's more things that you can try, more things that it's an artistic expression here. So there's going to be different things you're going to want to play with and try and see. What's it going to be like to write, something that you've never written before, to write in a new genre, or have an unreliable narrator. I mean, there's all sorts of things that you can learn and that you can play with as you're creating.
And kudos to you for listening to this podcast, because that tells me you're probably already a lifetime learner, because otherwise you wouldn't just be sitting down listening to a couple of people talking about writing. So kudos about that.
Yeah.
The other thing we recommend, of course, you've always heard us talk about going to writers' conferences. We love writers' conferences because it's a way that you can go to a bunch of courses. You can see the publishing state of today and how to get published. Now, the great thing is a lot of writing conferences are now also online. So you can go online, you can join summits and webinars and all that sort of thing, learn a lot about writing. We have, again, at our own website at writingmomentum.com, we have what we like to call a perpetual writers conference. It's always on. We have co-writing sessions together. We have training, a lot of training in there. We've got critique sessions. We've got round tables. All these kind of things will help your writing, and it's totally worth the investment to go to a writers conference or join us at writingmomentum.com, because that will help you get your writing done faster and better.
Absolutely. We hope you have enjoyed this podcast today. If you have, we hope that you will rate it, that you will leave a review, that you will subscribe to it so you never miss one, and that you will even share it with a friend. If you have someone who's been thinking about writing, or they've started something but they've been frustrated, or maybe they've even finished something but they feel like, where do I go from here? I want to get better. My first one maybe wasn't where I want it to be. Share this with them so that they can be encouraged that there are ways that you can continually learn how to be a better writer.
And how to have writing momentum. That's what we talked about this week. That's what we're going to talk again about next week. You don't want to miss that one, because together
we have writing momentum.
Bye-bye.